Well, what's our first step here? Well, we want content validity. So we want to know what's the universe of content associated with our brand new construct of scholarly orientation. And so where do you start? Well, you start with the definition. We have to define this construct first to decide what it's going to be. And what I like about both Hinken and Tracy and Anderson and Gerbing is they really elevate the importance of definitions. They elevate the importance of having this anchor in the ground, the stake in the ground that says, okay, at its core, here's what this is. We don't always think about construct definitions to the degree to which we should. We don't iterate on them, tweak them and improve them over time to the degree that we should. So we need a definition for scholarly orientation for our running example. And here's what I'm going to go with today. Striving to develop understanding by studying phenomena and gathering data about them. Okay, so it's a striving, it's a motivational state. What is it geared towards? Developing understanding. How do we do that? We try to study something, we try to gather data about that thing. So now we know kind of what this is. A few comments on crafting definitions. I think it's important to draw on both a dictionary and a thesaurus. As we're going to see in both of these techniques, the words you use matter. Ed Locke had a chapter some years ago that argued a lot of us would be better off if our definitions came from dictionaries a little bit more than our own theorizing. And I think he was being hyperbolic to some degree in that, but I think the point he was making was sometimes we overcomplicate phenomena. We create these definitions that have 3 or 4 or 5 clauses, some of which are a little bit debatable, some of which are a little bit tangential, and they make our definitions a little bit too complex. So rooting yourself in a dictionary or a thesaurus is nice at the start, but then also do draw on the academic literature. In this case, we might draw on definitions of related constructs. What are some other constructs that are strivings in the literature? How are those definitions structured? What are the ingredients of them? What's the rhythm of them? That would be another way to kind of get us started in terms of crafting a definition. And we should really follow the prescriptions of any book on writing, because writing a definition is like any other kind of writing. Every book on writing will tell you simpler is better. And as we'll see with these techniques, simplicity is valuable. And so don't overcomplicate the definition. Certainly don't clutter up the definition. So we've got the definition. How then are we going to create items? There's a lot of discussions of item generation. We don't go into a lot of detail about it in this paper. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it today because you're going to read about it from other folks. But just briefly, consider manifestations rooted in the definition. How would this construct manifest on a Tuesday, on a Thursday afternoon, on a Saturday morning? Think about what those manifestations might be. If you want some additional things that perhaps you haven't thought of, gather open-ended data in a qualitative way with some relevant population of interest. Give the definition of scholarly orientation and ask, okay, what does this look like in your life? And now you've got some additional manifestations. Now, with both of these, attention is to balance how specific a manifestation is with how applicable it is across contexts and across samples. So for our lives, for example, we might say, well, I read the latest issue of AMJ. And that works for us for scholarly orientation in our lives, but I can't give that item to a salesperson. I can't give that item to a financial analyst. I can't give that item to a coder at a firm like Google. And so we have to balance that specificity with applicability. And then lastly, create more items than you need. There's a quote from Klein's source equation modeling book that I've always liked in terms of the indicators for a latent variable. 2 might be fine, 3 is better, 4 is best, anything more is gravy. Leave yourself with a lot of gravy. So that if some of these items don't perform as well as you expect them to from a content validity perspective, you can prune them back much like you would for a low factor loading or low item total correlation. And so I wanted to generate some items for our brand new construct. And so you see the definition up there. And here's 7 items that are essentially manifestations of scholarly orientation. If you have that kind of striving, then you probably read up on a subject. You probably tinker and experiment a little bit. You probably reflect on things until you figure them out. You look around you for anecdotal cases that support or refute your conception of how these things work. You may find that you just simply can't get enough of a certain piece of content. You might approach stuff with the mindset of a researcher, and certainly given how fundamental why is to theory and theorizing, you probably ask a lot of why questions when you're pursuing what it is that intrigues you. And so we got 7, I think, reasonable looking items for scholarly orientation, but we don't want to rush out and collect data in some sample with these, because we don't yet know if they're good. We don't yet know if they're content valid. Now, a judgment call. We're going to talk about a few different judgment calls today. I will always illustrate them with a green box. And so whenever you see the green box, we're going to talk about a judgment call. In this case, none of these items use words from the definition. You'll notice that the word striving does not appear in any of the items, nor does understanding or study or data, right? That's neither good nor bad, but I will tell you now that the analyses that we're about to talk about, that's going to change things a little bit. If you use words from the definition, the kinds of stats that we'll talk about today will be a bit better than if you don't. And so almost as an artifactual kind of wording overlap, you're going to get better instances of the stats that we're going to talk about. So I would say if you want to be more conservative with your results, avoid using items in the definition. And maybe you have a construct for whatever reason that just demands it. There's no way around this particular word other than to use the word in a direct measurement kind of sense. That's fine. Again, I don't mean to say this is right or wrong. It just is a judgment call. In this case, I made the explicit decision not to use a word that's in the definition.